Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 855. I can't drive. It is the Japanese Grand Prix review. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camber. You know what we do on race weekends.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do. And tonight we're going to cover the Japanese Grand Prix. Before doing that, I have to introduce my guest. You know him, you love him.
Ripped from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Paul, you have been away from home low this past fortnight.
Yes.
Holed up in a safe house in Florida, in between
There
races.
is such a thing. Yeah.
Right. In between races, and you are finally back at Casa de Charlesley. Welcome home.
Oof, thanks, man. 12 hours now. I don't know what to do with myself. You know? Yeah, no, I think I need to be at home for a week. The lawn was horrendous.
I was just going to say, being home, while you're away, Paul, your wife and family worked up a to-do list for you now that you're back home.
Yeah. If only they recognized me when I walked through the door, that would have been helpful. Who the hell are you? Quick, call the police.
God's president called the cops on you.
There's a
Got an
strange man
intruder.
in my house. Yeah.
Did the dogs remember you?
Yeah, they did.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
good.
They were good.
They recognized the smell of Vindaloo from a mile away.
That's, well, hopefully not. That's what it was, but yes. Yes. Double race weekends back to back.
Yeah.
Going to another one next week, but
where are you at next week?
Next week you go back to Indy for the SRO finale.
Yep.
And then I'll be home for a day and then off to Petit Le Mans. And then that
Petit's a
concludes
great race.
Season 2023, kinda, sorta.
Sorta.
Yeah, it never stops, but yeah.
Yeah, that's Petit's great. I've been to that a few times.
It is.
That's a great race.
Yeah, so Sebring was a bit tough.
Yeah.
Well, promised so much, ended up being, a handful of crap, really. But yeah, I mean, Roman got the pole in Pro-Am. Rihanna nearly got second, but was like half a tenth off of getting pole in their class. So we nearly had double poles for the cars. But unfortunately, someone took Gray out in the Pro-Am car, and Rihanna was right behind them in race one. And so they all went off. Luckily, Rihanna was able to scramble back on the track without impacting the wall, but the other two cars did. So she lost all those positions she had rightfully earned. And they fought their way up to fifth, so that was good.
Yeah, great recovery.
For the 26th, the girl car, so that was great. But then the next day, we got in a tussle with a pro car. Hannah got in a tussle with a pro car in turn 17, notorious bumpy 17, and that took that car out. And then the other car had to start from the back of the pack because we had to change chassis because of the crash. And so they fought their way up to eighth, but that's all we could do. So I said the cars were really good and the drivers did really well, but this wasn't on the cards for a great result.
It's one of those that's racing things.
It is, but oh man.
Yeah. Disheartening, but yeah.
Yeah, we've made great progress with Hannah and Rihanna this year, and they're like, we deserve a damn podium for crying out loud. Now we only got one more chance, but we'll do what we can.
Well, hopefully you'll get at the podium there. That would be great.
Yeah, it would be.
Well, you managed to watch the Japanese Grand Prix. I know you wouldn't miss it because this is one of your favorite tracks.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm trying to think, there's not, what better track is there apart from maybe Monaco, just for pure terror of riding along with these, riding in the cockpit with the in-car cameras. I mean, Suzuka just has it all, quite honestly, right?
It does. Man, those fast sweeping corners, the drivers are constantly working.
Yeah, it's got the perfect balance between flow and challenge. I think.
Yeah.
Is it better than Spa? I don't know, mate. They're
right there. For me, they're both kind of right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Two of the tracks definitely in the top 5 I'd ever want to drive. And so always fun just to watch one car go around Suzuka, but to see a race there. Yeah. And which turned out to be a very entertaining race, I thought. So
it was. I really enjoyed the race. I thought it was great. It was a fantastic track, offered a lot of strategy and even some passing on there. I thought it was great. Some good battles up and down. I mean, up front, I am glad to see that my concerns over the technical directive in Singapore was not a specific impact on Red Bull, as clearly evidenced by this weekend, in particular, and at least it doesn't appear to be, given this weekend's clearly dominant performance by Red Bull. So I'm glad that those were unfounded concerns on my part. As I've discussed in the past, I like seeing tracks that have been on the calendar for a long time because, as I mentioned before, you remember it really shows the evolution of the cars when you have things like Silverstone, Spa, Monza, Monaco, Suzuka, Canada. These tracks have been on that calendar for a long time, and you can really see the evolution. And the clearest sign of that for me is always over the decades now to see which corners are the real challenges and which ones and then have been neutered over time.
Right.
And then which new corners or old corners become the new challenge, right? And in this case, you remember 130R was it? And yeah, they did some reprofiling there. But the reality of it, the challenge after they reprofiled, it became Spoon, and now it's Degner 2, which is a real boogner, to come around. And even Lewis, got a little ragged around there at one point. But yeah, tough corner. And I love to see that evolution. And then I was thinking Sunday evening, Paul, I took a little time and I went back and looked at a couple of the onboards, in particularly about the S's, right?
Yeah.
And those S's are so cool. It's one of the reasons I like Coda as well. I love those S's. And I love the S's at Suzuka. And it takes me back to, and if you're newer to the podcast, several years ago, Paul used to manage the whole Audi driving experience out at Sonoma, and he invited me out. And I went out there, and there's S's at Sonoma, and so Paul was showing me kind of the art of the S's and how you take them, and how critical they are. So I went back because, as you've said many times on this podcast, if you don't get it right entering those S's, that is compounded and you're screwed all the way through.
Yes.
And I didn't know what that meant until I was at Sonoma, and you showed me. If you get that wrong, there's no real recovery with the rate of speed and what you're doing. I mean, you've ruined the whole sequence, right?
Yeah.
And so I went back and I was watching those onboards Sunday evening of a few drivers going through those S's, and you can see it. You can see guys that got a little deep into that entry, and then had to check up, and then you measure the time, and you were spot on, obviously. But I think that's a really cool feature. Plus, it seemed to me, Paul, over the balance of that weekend, it's those S's were one of the higher tire degradation areas. If you didn't get them right with all that lateral move back and forth.
Yeah. As soon as you start sliding, you're really loaded up, so that just rips those tires to pieces. Yeah.
So maybe from a driver's perspective, I think I'm relatively on target, but how tough are those S's to the entirety of your lap?
Yeah, I mean, you can get, you obviously need a rhythm, you can get a line, you can get a breaking point, but also you got to think it's going to change a lot with tire deg and with fuel. So you don't just have to have a plan, you have to have multiple plans and make them adaptable plans. And so literally every time you go through them, you're feeling for where the car's going. And okay, well, next time I come in, I'm going to have to maybe cut in just a little harder, hold it a little bit initially into that first sector, because otherwise the car is just going to start losing the front end through the others. So you've got to make those adjustments throughout the race, throughout qualifying, etc. And it's a rhythm thing. So it's really technically difficult to change things all the time, but still somehow envelop that rhythm in there, else you'll just be off sync the whole time. So that's where the challenge is where the car changes, and then how you adapt to that. And maybe if this starts understeering, then you're going to have to change turning points. If the car's a little loose, then you're going to have to change braking points, etc. So the evolution is epic, and that's why the drivers love it, right? That's why they like the challenge. Yeah, it's great. And I mean, it happens to be one of your and I, both of ours, favorite places to watch at Coda. Is down at turn 7, 8, 9. At those S's, at the end of the S's,
where you can really, really see an F1 car doing what it was designed
And you can
to
see the
do.
differences in technique too. You know, you can hear
Yeah.
the throttle on, throttle off. You
Hmm.
can hear the brake. You can hear downshifts, not downshifts, etc. I remember when we were out there, I was saying, well, listen to this, listen to how
Hmm.
long they're carrying the engine in, how long this person is not. If this
Right.
one's downshift, you know, all those things. You can really tell how a car's handling and how a driver's dealing with just being so close to the track and listening. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was, and that was eye-opening because when we were sitting down there, you were listening to how quickly they get back on throttle.
Hmm.
And it tells you a lot about the condition of their tires, condition of the car, what the driver's doing in each
Right.
driver
Right.
areas. It's all part of it. But it was, it was really interesting watching those onboards. If you go back, if you've got like F1 TV or something, you go back and look at some of those onboards to the S's, you'll see some markedly different
Yeah.
lines as the race gets older, right?
And the good thing is, I always tell, even people look, drivers I know or drivers upcoming, and sometimes you're out there and you're beating yourself to death because you made a mistake here and there. Even F1 level drivers make mistakes every lap,
Hmm.
and and definitely that'll show itself in the S's and through challenging tracks like Suzuka. So you can see them gathering him back up, or sometimes not gathering him back up.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, Logan.
Yeah, yeah. It's so true because in those S's, and that's what I would see even lap by lap. So you'd see they kind of nailed it on that lap, the last lap. They maybe turned in a little late, maybe a little wide of the apex, and you could kind of see that.
Hmm.
I didn't see that on Max's pole lap. That was pretty stunning.
The rails, yeah, you can
Yeah,
see the
yeah.
rails underneath the car. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. If there was a track designed to flatter that Red Bull, this is it.
absolutely.
So let's talk about the race, and as they finish, we'll start off obviously with Red Bull with the win and the constructor champion. Red Bull, you had Sergio Perez, a DNF, which
You like my face? You like it?
no, Sergio, we don't. Very difficult. Max Verstappen takes the win. Sergio had a ragged weekend, Paul, well off the pace on Max on Friday and Saturday. Then he got into some chippy stuff at the start with Lewis, and everybody got jammed up there. Had an ill-advised, I would say, putting it politely, attempt on passing and damaged the car enough for two front wings, and which led to a DNF. He came back out 7 or 8, 9 laps down just to satisfy the not serving the 5-second penalty, which is a bit of an odd rule. But
Yeah.
anyway, they did do that. But he said obviously he would have liked to have clinched the constructor's title in a better way, and I would imagine the team would prefer that
Played a
too.
part in it, yes.
Yeah, played a part in it. Yeah. That would have been nice. But yeah, just seriously, a tough weekend. I don't even know. That pass was. I mean
Oh.
that was just maybe trying way too hard to make
Yeah, and if you
something
noticed,
happen.
he locked up just a little bit too,
He did.
which
Yeah.
which because obviously if you're going to get yourself inside there, you've got to be all over that curb,
Hmm.
to give yourself enough room. But when he turned in, he locked him up. So as soon as you lock up, you lose the front end. So that's what caused the impact. But obviously, him going in too hard and use the brakes too hard is what caused the lockup. So it's still his error. But ultimately,
Yeah.
it was the lockup that caused the impact.
Yeah. Had the tires held, he'd have checked up and
Yeah, but that's his job to not lock up. But
yeah.
yeah, I'm trying to figure out what he's doing because I don't know if there's two minds to this. Is like, is he still trying to chase Max, and he's trying to emulate Max every weekend, which means he's over driving, and it's something he's not capable of doing. Max is capable of doing it, but he's not willing to let that go. Would it be better if? I mean, he's in the best car.
Yeah.
He needs to freaking calm down.
Yeah.
I mean, making these desperate moves. I get it that Max can do that stuff, but Sergio, you're not Max Verstappen, unfortunately. You need to accept that and be Sergio. Don't be Max.
Right.
Sergio's a very good driver, but when Sergio tries to be Max, I don't think he's a very good driver, and I think that's what he's trying to do. Fighting for his seat, I suppose, but that's no way to do it, right? So
It's a great point, Paul, because if you think of like Valtteri, Valtteri wasn't Lewis,
no,
but
didn't try to be.
it didn't try to be, and Valtteri was happy being Valtteri, and he won several races.
Yeah.
he delivered a lot of points for Mercedes, which is exactly what Toto and team want him to do, right?
Right.
Think even if you go back to Barrichello and Schumacher, Rubin's a great guy. He's not Michael, but he wasn't trying constantly to be Michael. He was being Rubens, delivered a lot of points for that team. And
Right.
and that's kind of, you bring up a good point. Sergio should be racing as Sergio for the team. And if that's P2, P3, P4, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But DNFing, that's tough.
But he's putting himself behind the 8 ball, and then he's driving desperately to get himself up the front as soon as possible, to stake his claim on his seat. And it's just backfiring quite heavily, obviously. There's one, you can have an off weekend, you can have bad luck, but there's been too many of these weekends this year.
Yeah, there have. From Max's perspective, as I mentioned last week, he was going to enter this weekend. I felt like a caged lion, and I knew he would storm into the weekend looking for redemption. He was going to cram that whole Singapore weekend so far up everybody's backside we could taste it, and that's exactly what he did. He got redemption. His dominant performance finally prompted the Sky Crew, I noticed, to scold viewers for not understanding just how special he is and what an amazing job the team has done. And I was looking at social media, and as soon as Karun or Martin, everybody said, you have to appreciate what's being achieved here. All these people on social media slamming Sky for being biased and all that.
Good grief.
I know, it's just this constant cesspool, but congratulations. And this is the Constructors' Championship that they secured this past weekend. They're 6th for Red Bull as a team. And, I think you do have to appreciate, and big congratulations to Red Bull for scoring their 6th title win. You've got to hand it, Paul, to all the men and women at that team, whether they're trackside or even back at Milton Keynes. The work this team, it's very much like the men and women at Mercedes for those past 8 years, right? The work this team is doing, the mechanics, everybody, the pit stops, the design, everything they're doing is so, I guess, harmonious and simpatico with what Max is able to achieve. And this is kind of bottled lightning, Paul, but I don't want to, Max is something special, but I don't want to overlook the incredible work the men and women of this team have done. They deserve that championship.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we had the Mercedes dominance and everyone's just ready to change everything, but it's even more so that Red Bull have been able to come from behind and develop a car that is now dominant over the mighty Mercedes. And, they're all working hard. I think it's great, and someone, we even saw McLaren, as Lando was saying, it's like, we're coming for you. So, it's going to be great to see someone knock them off their stool at some point. But right now, they really have developed a car and a driver package that is untouchable. We have seen this stuff before, but as I say, just sit back in awe, appreciate, brilliance.
It's amazing.
And then appreciate when someone figures a way to beat them too. So,
well, that's that's the big it will come. That's one thing you can bank on. It will change. May not be this year, may not be next year, and like with Lewis and Mercedes, it wasn't for 8 years, right? Yeah. But eventually it will. And it's always kind of exciting to see when it happens. You talked about McLaren, Lando Norris in P2, Oscar Piastri, the rookie in P3, great drive for him. Let's. This is a feel-good story of the weekend, or I'd even argue that McLaren is kind of the feel-good story of the second half of the season. Paul Lando, he had a great start, nearly jumped Max and Oscar. Oscar had a better start than Max. Max focused on Oscar, keeping Oscar behind. Meanwhile, Lando was over on the outside, threatening to pass both of them, but he ends up slotting into second. They look set for a podium, but Oscar got that free stop or slightly free stop under the virtual safety car. That put him ahead of Lando. After Lando's stop, he was clearly quicker, and the team opted to swap positions to allow Lando to chase Max, and he did. A terrific drive to P2. And to your point, Lando said, he was elated with the result, obviously dual podium, but Lando had a fantastic drive, I thought, really measured, and he couldn't be happier with all the hard work that the men and women in Woking have been doing, which is just brilliant, the second half.
Yeah, that start was interesting because I mean, after us also Lando was like, well, I nearly got outside it, but then Max is Max because he's fully expecting Max is just not going to give an inch, right? And for Lando, the mindset is different, right? Max is, if they had contact, I'm not sure Max would care. He's got, but Lando, it's like the McLaren group have worked so hard to make the cars competitive. He's like, well, yeah, I could have bravado and put my elbows out against Max and hang it out a little longer, and we have contact, we end up in the fence, and that's one thing. But for a team like McLaren who were really down at the beginning of the year, and have gradually ebb and flowed, and now they've seemed to be a little more consistent at the front. They've got a job to do, which to hunt down championship position, and they cannot afford, to fight elbows to elbows with Max and jeopardize a solid finishing spot, and obviously all the points that they actually did gain. So that's if you think Lando should have been more aggressive, I disagree because of the bigger picture for that team.
Yeah, I think Lando kind of big pictures it in that sense, and I think you're right. I think at this point they're challenging for fourth in the constructors. They're challenging Aston Martin right now.
Yeah,
and so
and
that's
the way
their
Aston Martin
real
are
race.
running with the one-armed team.
Right.
They're not likely. They've got a great shot at doing it too.
Yeah, they really do, and certainly in the hands of Oscar and Lando, they got a great shot doing it. Oscar had a great race, got jumped by Lando there at the start, had that free stop with the virtual safety car, that got him ahead. Then he faded. He moved over for Lando, who was much quicker at that time. He said it wasn't his best race, but he was very happy with the team result. And as I mentioned, McLaren are moving dangerously close to passing Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship. And, seemingly unlike Aston Martin's ownership or leadership, I think Zach fully understands what it means being fifth versus fourth in the championship.
Yes,
and
does.
the millions are involved.
Yeah, I'm sure he's got a little bonus percentage there for where he finishes. So he's probably calculating that every day.
Zach,
He likes his money.
He may be a lot of things, but he's not a guy who would miss the nuance that there could be tens of millions of dollars between fifth and fourth. So he's going to be going for it,
Yeah, definitely not.
But yeah, kudos to McLaren, and Grace should be super happy for her team. This team has just really turned it around. I couldn't be happier for them to see them bring the fight back.
For so long, they've been, kind of they were a bit of a joke, right?
Yeah,
when
much like my team.
Much like your team.
Right.
So I don't pick a team. I don't have to worry about that stuff.
Yeah, I know. I should just quit picking teams.
Great job by Piastri. It was interesting, a little dynamic, maybe a little bit of something going on there between him and Lando, but it seemed all fun at the end. So they're all proper competitive people. So a little bit of to and fro there during their exchange, and is he going to let me over? What's he doing here? Kind of stuff. Seems to be water under the bridge by the time they finish, and they're both on the podium, and everyone's happy. So I think everyone understanding who how competitive each of those drivers is, then they can get over it. So it was a great day for McLaren for sure.
Yeah. There's one thing you can gather out of this weekend is that Lando didn't like getting beat. He hates it, certainly by his teammate, and a rookie at that. That ain't going to go well with Lando. So let's see. Speaking of Ferrari, you had Charles Leclerc in P4, Carlos Sainz in P6. Ferrari weren't on par with McLaren, but they did have their own private war with Mercedes all day long. They two-stopped both cars. Like George, Carlos was a bit of a sacrificial lamb for Leclerc. Just like Leclerc was the sort of sacrificial lamb for Carlos in Singapore. So they both lost spots trying to help against the undercuts. And then Lewis and George, they were trying to hold them off, trying to hold back the Mercedes of Hamilton, but they did Carlos couldn't hold off or couldn't get. Let me try this in English. Carlos couldn't in the end get around Lewis. Lewis was able to
Right.
hold Carlos off. He did get around Russell and pick up the points. So you had Charles Leclerc ahead of Lewis. So Ferrari and then a Mercedes, Ferrari and then a Mercedes. So they kind of had him covered. And that really kind of is the battle in that championship going right now. Ferrari
Yeah.
and Mercedes.
Yeah. No, I mean, nothing to be embarrassed about by Ferrari, I don't think. I mean,
Yeah.
this track just wasn't for them, but I think they nearly maximized their one. It was interesting. It was back and forth between them and Mercedes, which I found extremely entertaining. Literally a straight out fight
Yeah, it was.
on the track. So I enjoyed it. I mean, Leclerc just kind of trolled around, didn't get too involved in too much. Sainz was the one, having to battle the Mercs at the end there. So and he nearly did it done, but obviously a little different than Singapore. But overall, not terrible for Ferrari. And it's going to be a close on thing all the way to the end of the year, probably for them.
Yeah, these are going to be really good battles, second
Yeah.
all the way down. These are going to be a lot of fun to watch between Ferrari,
Yeah.
Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin, so on. So I think those are going to be a lot of fun. And as you mentioned, Charles, kind of a quieter race. He was quicker for much of the weekend, though.
Yeah.
Had a better quality, converted that into a P4. He wasn't entirely happy with that, but knows that they didn't really have the pace to battle McLaren. Beating Mercedes is the goal for them this weekend, and that's what they did. So, like you said, not a miserable weekend. Coming off of a win the previous weekend, yeah, you'd like to thought they'd carry that, but it wasn't in the balance of things. Speaking of Mercedes, you had Lewis Hamilton P5, George Russell in P7. Lewis was not entirely happy with the car this weekend. He was a little chippy, I would say, in the press about it.
I think
but
they were all a little chippy at Mercedes this weekend. So.
Yeah, they were, and but Lewis kind of had his elbows out this weekend. I liked it,
Yeah,
a little fire under Lewis. He came back a little critical in the press. Toto was away, while the cat's away, and he was not entirely happy. I had that clash with Perez early on in the opening lap. That wasn't his fault. Caused some damage, which probably didn't help him much. He spent most of the early part of the race battling with his own teammate George, who felt that Lewis pushed him wide as they traded passing attempts. And then Lewis was allowed to swap places with George late in the race, and he came home ahead of Carlos in P5. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it was good. I guess what's interesting here is that George was on older tires. Lewis had more pace. And so the team swapped them. The team wasn't convinced that, letting them run as they were was going to secure Lewis.
or anything.
Or anything.
Because they were going to back into each other and be done. Yeah.
I think you have to factor that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They've been going at each other.
They're like, you in that room, you in that corner.
Well, you would put Carlos in as a buffer,
Yeah.
So Carlos becomes the referee and the buffer in there. I think that because they've been going at a hammer and tongs for most of the race. Oof. So getting them split was probably a good thing.
This is my favorite battle of the weekend.
Yeah.
Both on track, physically on track, and through words over the radio back and forth, and how they're both playing that game. We know Russell's, no idiot when it comes to using his words a lot wisely and like a dagger, basically. Yeah, they both ran each other off the road. I think they ran awfully close and very tight. I mean, it was like, oh man, is this going to become a Rosberg Hamilton thing? I don't know. I think Toto's going to avoid that like the plague.
Yeah, he didn't want it.
But it was. I mean, I don't know if they fought fair because I don't think they really did, but they fought hard, and I think it was fair in the fact that they both fought as hard as each other, right? And they both had their goes and their chances to run each other off the road and take a position and hard driving. So I was thoroughly entertained. I was actually laughing watching. I remember lap 16 or something. I was like, oh man, this is so fantastic. So loved it. I think it's great. The work is I don't know where it's going to go from here. Could go backwards or forwards, but maybe Toto's going to have a word with them, say, okay, everyone calm the hell down. But for us, entertaining, watching Suzuka, one of the best tracks of the year, and watching these guys go at it, I thought was maybe my highlight of the whole weekend.
Yeah. Well, you had George on the older tires. Lewis had more pace, so he was thinking, in George's mind that George would do like the Carlos at Singapore, and keep signs behind both Mercs. Lewis wasn't convinced that would work, and neither was Toto, I guess, who ultimately called for the swap.
Or Ant Davison, actually. Yeah.
Well, Ant Davison, and I kind of agreed with him at the time. I was kind of wondering how that would have played out, because Lewis was clearly quicker, and with DRS, I'm not 100% convinced that Carlos would have got around him. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure he would have. I think, you can look back at Singapore, the track's a whole different configuration, and the performance of the cars are in a different spot. I really think if they'd attempted that, they would have failed. So I think they actually made the right move.
Yeah.
I understand why they thought, oh, we've seen this work before. I just don't think here, where those cars were and the tire life that Russell had, he had any hope of holding them back.
Yeah, I think the reason that I doubt whether it would have worked was kind of what the team said after the race, that the amount of degradation George had and the rate at which he was degrading wouldn't have made that possible.
No, he would have ended up tripping Lewis up in the end. So I thought it was best to let Lewis go and have him fight Sainz one-on-one, but he could have been a fly in the ointment of Lewis's race, let alone Sainz's. So I think it was the correct call.
Yeah, I think hindsight, as a fan on the outside looking in, I think in hindsight and looking at it, I think it was the right call. But at the time, I was kind of thinking, I don't know. Would that have worked? And so I was initially agreeing with Ant, but then reading the team, Andrew Shevlin's comments after that, the nature of the track, the level of degradation he had, and the rate just wouldn't have worked.
No.
But anyway, what I did like and what I did notice is I liked the fact that Lewis got his elbows out at this race. I enjoyed that. I think he's kind of had a butt full of George at this point. I think he's like, hey. Seven time here. Call me seven time. The other thing I noticed about Lewis is, the thing that's been kind of challenging him with George this year is his qualifying. And this weekend he out-qualified George. And that's been, I think, Lewis, kind of an area where he wanted to improve is qualifying. So he's not putting himself in these positions. And so he did a better qualifying this weekend.
Yeah, George is definitely his first rival right now.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Let's see, Aston Martin.
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
You do, don't you?
Yeah, kind of.
Can we say? But you can't say it. It's like, I know what the problem is, but I can't say it. Nobody can say it. Don't say it.
I want it now. What's the matter with those twats down there?
Yeah.
The name that could not be named.
Yes. Don't say the baby's name. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll, DNS, Fernando Alonso, P8. Alonso started on the softs, and they initially gained several spots, but he had to box early. And as the race unfolded with the other drivers on fresher tires, he lamented the strategy as the first set of hards wasn't really that competitive. And it wasn't until he got on that second set, Paul, that actually he became a little more competitive there towards the latter stages in the lighter car. And then he was able to consolidate P8. He later said, the press, you're missing context to my whole, you threw me to the lions. You're missing, yes, it sounds like I'm all mad and angry and all, and I'm not. I'm just saying, we're just having this conversation.
He really did sound angry.
He did sound angry to me, but
you can say whatever you want after it, but okay.
Yeah,
we were just having fun. I was shouting and screaming at him.
Yeah,
he had some venom in that voice.
Yeah,
quite honestly.
He did. I haven't heard that
enjoying
since
the gradual fallback of the team, I think.
And I haven't heard that kind of voice since GP2 engine. If I'm honest.
Yeah, he wasn't happy.
Yeah,
I don't care what he says.
So yeah, but anyway, after his comments post race was, he had a great weekend. Car felt all right on that second set of hards, able to consolidate P8. It was all good. Everything's fine. Just keep writing those paychecks.
Yep.
Lance's race ended with a rear wing failure. So, it's beyond his control, obviously. He did feel that maybe a point or two was on the cards. And to be honest, the team actually needs those points, Lance.
Yeah.
because McLaren is closing the gap quickly to fourth.
Please, sir, can I have some more?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
To be fair to Alonso, I think the performance of the car had this weekend, if you watch Friday and Saturday, P8 probably was maximizing it.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
It's just a shame, as we know, when the car was ultra competitive, that they weren't scoring double points to give themselves a buffer.
that's the killer.
Basically, Alonso's taken this team championship standings on his shoulders, and
He is.
he's doing all he can, as he always does.
Yep.
And he gives everything, and he gets everything out of it. But they're going to look back and say, "Wow, we lost an opportunity to be a bit more at ease going into the final race of the season."
And I'm not purposely trying to be harsh with Lance, because at the beginning of this podcast, you and I said the same very thing about Sergio.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, when you have a tool like a Red Bull, a Mercedes, an Aston Martin, as you mentioned, that was really on song early on, you have to deliver points in both cars, and Fernando has been doing that pretty much single-handedly. So at some point, I from Lawrence's standpoint, maybe that didn't matter. Maybe he's got enough money and he couldn't care less.
Yeah.
But I think at some point that's it starts to breed. It starts to become a little demoralizing for the team on that side of the garage. All that hard work, or it's just, what's the point?
Maybe it's it could be something. As I said, not just all Lance. Could be the engineer.
Could be
relationship, something. But they need to shake something up on that side of the garage, because it's really pulling them back.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. Alpine, another little fur flying over at Alpine this weekend. You had Pierre Gasly P10, Esteban Ocon P9, as gifted by Pierre Gasly, according to him. Esteban got caught up in that first turn altercation. He had some damage. He had to box at the end of that first lap. From there, he actually did have some good moves throughout the race, moved back up that field, climbed in the top 10, so he's there on merit. Things got a little more interesting when Pierre had fresher tires in the final stint, so he felt he may have been a little more competitive and able to and make a run at Fernando and run down P8. And Pierre said he actually felt like P8 was the offering. In the end, though, they ran out of laps. So everybody thought, well, we'll hold station and finish here. Nah. See, that's where you'd be wrong, because Alpine got on the radio and said, no, give the place back to Esteban. We let you pass. Now you got to give it back. And Pierre was furious, because it was like, okay, that was never part of the conversation we were having. And he was not happy on the radio about that at all.
I wouldn't be either.
And the team was like, well, that's what we do. We let him pass, see if he can make a run. If he wasn't, we're going to put him back. It's like,
I understand that's in some points, but not in this one. You run the strategy, you maximize it, and you find your position, and no, your teammate, he lets him pass because he shouldn't fight him, but that doesn't mean you should always give the place back just because your teammate allowed you to go by with ease rather than fight tooth and nail. I think it's a bit demoralizing for a driver to do that. I don't think it's right, honestly. Yeah,
I mean, there's two other instances I think we can look at out of this race with McLaren, right? They didn't swap those back, and Mercedes, they didn't swap it back. They made the call, which maximized the strategy of each individual car and the age of their tires, right? So anyway, it's he was not happy nonetheless. However, all that being said, focusing on the negative side of that, it was a dual points finish, which Alpine definitely needed.
They just need more higher finishes, but
more points.
Don't they all, right?
Yeah, they all do. Yeah, right. Let's see. Now we get down to AlphaTauri. Ooh, boy. This was fun to watch.
Yes, it was.
So on Saturday, AlphaTauri came out super excited to announce their driver lineup for 2024. It's going to be Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda. They're super excited. And why, what better place in Japan to have Yuki out at the press conference? I'm going to be the driver next year with Daniel. We're all excited and all that. And then Sunday comes in and Liam Lawson sends a message.
Yeah.
Lawson down to P11, Yuki Tsunoda in P12. Yuki and Liam had some good tussles there early on, and they were fighting hammer and tongs, just like Lewis and George. Liam coming out on top and leading the pair of them. Now, came to the first stop, they favored Yuki, even though he was trailing Liam. They stopped him first to avoid an undercut behind Yuki, which in turn gave Yuki an undercut on Liam. So he came back out in front of Liam, right? Now, in fairness to the team, when it came to that second stop, Yuki was leading, Liam was behind, and they reversed it. They boxed Liam first. He undercut Yuki and got back out in front. Now, the kicker was the race to the end got really exciting between the two of them because they reversed that. Now Liam's leading, and Liam managed to keep Yuki. Despite Yuki having DRS, he managed to keep Yuki behind him and beat his teammate to P11. In short, not to be a jerk, but this is exactly why I would have signed Dan and Liam for next year, because in my mind, Yuki has had 3 years to do what Liam has just done in 3 races.
Yep, I agree. I would not be hiring Yuki. There's obviously some kind of
Honda
financial
incentive
there to keep Yuki on. That it's definitely not a sporty decision.
No.
So, and I said everyone's, oh, Dan's finished. I think that the jury is definitely not out on Daniel Ricciardo being finished, and he brings a lot to the team. You know, brings personality, brings experience, and everything like that. Something that team, you know, would be happy to have. And then backing up with Liam, who's obviously doing a heck of a job, you know, in his first few races in F1. And we've always said, if you can somehow show yourself to be something special, even in a bad car, just do something special in it. And I think that's what he's doing.
It is.
So
it is.
It is a shame. I don't know what they've got in mind for him. Unfortunately, the Red Bull opportunities have an end point, and there's no room for him at the end. And so I don't know what they're going to do with him, but he's definitely a guy worthy of an F1 seat for sure.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I've always said, you know, I get on this podcast and wax poetic about, you know, like when George got called up Mercedes or Albon or whoever it is at Red Bull or whatever it is. And I'd always talk about, you know, that what you've got to do is you got to go in and you got to knock their feet off the desk. And that's what you got to do. And it's exactly what Lewis did to Fernando at McLaren. Vettel did at Weber at Red Bull, right? And, you know, Lauda's done it. Senna's done it, right? All the greats have done it, and that's what you've got to do. And it's and then you get your opportunity when you go in and knock the team leader's foot off the desk. But in this case, unfortunately, it's not paying dividends, at least at AlphaTauri for him. And it's unfortunate because I guess I would put, you're right, it's not a sporting decision. I guess we have to put Yuki and Lance in like the Stroll space-time continuum where decisions on those two aren't made on sporting decisions alone. There's money somewhere you know,
there might be a little seat at Williams opening up. I've got a feeling.
Yeah, there might be something over there.
I don't know how their relationship is with them, but obviously, you know, Albon came from Red Bull and found his way to Williams. I'm not sure. You know,
maybe James would view AlphaTauri as a Williams training ground. Since he got Albon different from there, right?
Don't say that to Marco. Jesus.
I know, but you know, Williams. If I'm James, I'm thinking, I'll take you the rejects from AlphaTauri.
They've looked pretty good so far.
They look great. Yeah. And actually, I think that would be a terrific lineup, Liam and Albon.
Oh, it would.
It'd be a great lineup at Williams next year. You know.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. Enough of my ranting. Sorry, Liam. Hopefully you get that Williams seat. That would be good. Nothing against Logan, but let's see. Alfa Romeo, Bottas at DNF, Joe go on you, P13. Valtteri got tangled up in 2 incidents, really not of his making. The first is being squeezed by Ocon, which made him move left, and then he hit Albon. That caused damage to the front wing and a puncture. He boxed early. That put him at the back. The second, he was just absolutely cloudy. He was mugged by Logan Sargent. That spun him around. Even to get Valtteri, all heated up on the radio, I think it takes a little bit. And he was pissed. He was not. He was not happy. It was, when he got on the radio, he was pretty mad. It kind of reminds me of the Seb radio. It's like,
Yeah, pretty much, pretty simple. Yeah,
yeah, it's pretty similar. So it game over for him. He was out. Joe hit all that debris in turn one at the start of the race. This damaged his front wing, so he boxed early too. That put him at the back. And then I don't know. I was thinking, with all this attrition, there's 5 cars out, Joe. Get up there and get in, nip a point, but he couldn't do it.
No, it's a typical Alfa Romeo race of late, really, just kind of meandering around in the middle of the backpack. So, unfortunately,
yes, it was. Haas F1, Nico Hulkenberg P14, Kevin Magnussen P15. I think Haas knew this wasn't going to be a track that suited their car from the very beginning. They, went into this weekend and kind of as an also ran. I think they pretty much conceded that this was going to be difficult for them given their tire degradation. I was thinking with all that attrition, maybe they'll get a little higher than 14, 15. Unfortunately, they didn't. Couldn't manage a point. Nico ended up doing a 3-stopper, Paul. Magnussen seemed somewhat competitive, but his tires hit a cliff. As they were worried about in the final stages. He drifted backwards. And then Kevin got spun by Perez with a very dodgy move that put him backwards. That didn't help Kevin's race out at all. I think Kevin called it a little too opportunistic of a move.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely if you were going to pick, high deg track, lots of loaded corners, this is not going to be a good track for them. They have, I think, got better at their deficit, but this is definitely, it could have been worse if they hadn't made some progress with fighting the degradation. But definitely was never going to be on for them. They just kind of showed up, stayed their hours and then went home.
Yeah, it's interesting too when you get to the smaller teams whose development cycles isn't as there's not as much alacrity to the development cycles that the larger teams do. But it's kind of interesting, Paul, because it's interesting to see how each track sort of exposes what their current car is capable of. Whereas Haas has been pretty decent at some tracks, and then you get a track like this, and it really exposes what that chassis is struggling with.
I'm wondering if they're literally when's the new regs come in?
26,
2025, 26. So if they're going to be around, I don't know if they will, but they nearly have to write off not just this year, but they can't make a lot of I don't see them making a lot of progress, because if they really want to stay in Formula One and be something, they've got to start working on that car pretty heavily right now, because they don't have the resources to throw in, a year later. So I'm not sure what we can expect from Haas.
Yeah, I'm sure they're working already on next year's car, but
right. But I'm saying
and beyond.
And for all of them to turn this ship around and make Haas not just an also ran every season and having a couple of highlights here and there, I think they've got to be working pretty hard on the development of that car, even more so than some other teams are already.
Yeah, and let's be honest, some of those highlights aren't really highlights, but they end up becoming highlights because they're dramatic. Crashes, running off, that kind of stuff. So hopefully they get that turned around. I would imagine they're working on next year's car, but I think you're right. I think if Gene's in it, then you kind of need to be in it, and you've got Andretti knocking on the door, and Gene needs to. It takes a lot of money. It's much easier for me just to say that than it is for Gene to do it. So don't get me wrong, but I think Gene's got to look at that long term, as you suggest, Paul, in that 2026, and what are we going to do to turn this whole operation around, so the men and women working on these cars can work to something that is considerably more competitive.
Right. I mean, look what Aston Martin are doing. They're doing that, right? And that's an example that
McLaren's doing it.
But it takes a lot of effort and thought and funding, obviously, as well.
It does.
To build that infrastructure, to be able to be adaptable and develop a car to be competitive.
Yeah, so take advantage while you're at the back and you get the majority of the wind tunnel time. take advantage of that. And I'm sure they are. They're smart people. But let's see. Williams, Alex Albon DNFs, Logan Sargent DNF. So really a good weekend for Williams.
They got the good thing is they beat the traffic out of the track.
Yeah, right.
You know, they got to the airport. There was no stress.
Yeah,
they were all good. James, you know, he probably got bumped up because, you know, the other guys are out there drinking champagne. So positives to everything.
Yeah, there's always a silver lining. If there's a question mark over Logan's head about his drive next year, it just lit up neon this weekend with that crash into Valtteri, and then a crash on Saturday, which made the car pretty much unusable. I got to be honest, I think things look to be winding up for Logan's F1 career at this point, much like Latifi's, unfortunately. The team got penalized because they repaired it, but Joe Bauer at the FIA said that the chassis, the spare chassis had way too much componentry built onto it. They're not allowed to do that, so they got a penalty for that. And just a nightmare.
It was too prepared.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was the deal. And just a nightmare situation. Albon got hit by Valtteri. That damaged his car at the beginning. Just too much damage, Alex said, to overcome, really. He said no car can really withstand that amount of damage. And Alex, to his credit, this is what I like about him. He said, the reality is, he goes, I had a marginal start. I didn't have a good start, and that kind of put me in the place to get hit. And but ultimately the car was damaged, couldn't finish, and that's that.
And that is that for Williams.
Yes,
indeed. Yeah.
So let's hand out some awards. Shall we do that?
Okay.
All right, let's do it. First award of the race is always move of the race.
Seriously, Todd?
Yes. Seriously, move of the race. Nobody's going to believe this, Paul. Independently of each other, you and I came up with the exact, not only names, but concept for move of the race.
That's right.
Completely independent of each other. I asked Paul before we started recording, who was your move of the race? He goes, well, I kind of came up with sort of the whole, what did you call it, Paul? The
highlights of the
race, right? Yeah. And I thought, what would that be? And we both ended up really liking the drivers that had their elbows out all weekend,
against their
teammates, and we both picked Liam on Yuki on Liam, George and Lewis on each other as sort of the highlights, which we really enjoyed.
I thought it was extremely entertaining, as I said, from the on-track back and forth and elbows out to also the verbiage being used between the two teams, each driver trying to coerce the team into giving them the advantage. But it was fun, real fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. So great show. Great to see Lewis with his arms out, his elbows out. Great to see George with his elbows out, trying to get around Lewis. Lewis ran wide at Degner, and George is on him like, stink on poop. And it was pretty funny. All right, next award is always Donkey of the Race.
We'll do it live.
Oh, yes, Paul. Donkey of the Race. I think we were also the same here, were we not?
I think us and the rest of the world probably would have picked this one.
Yeah. You like my face? You like it?
Nope. Poor Sergio. Bad weekend.
Another bad weekend, yeah.
Yeah, not good. So that's our Donkey of the Race. That just leaves Drive the Race, Paul.
Get down.
Get in there, Lewis.
Yes, Drive of the Race, Paul. Who'd you have?
Well, you can't. How do you not give it to Max?
Yeah, it was an incredible weekend.
I mean, as in literally the drive of the race. But Lando, I think, did an awesome job in.
Yeah, he did.
In keeping close to Max, at least keeping him in the same zip code, as they say.
Yeah.
So I think Lando has honorable mention, but Max Verstappen was supreme this weekend.
Yeah, he was sublime. Yeah, no doubt about it. That whole weekend, the qualifying, everything was just, my gosh, what a textbook weekend that was for driving. Let me shake things up a little bit. You got Max and Lando. Absolutely, I agree with you. I'll throw out Drive of the Race to both Liam and Oscar. I think both of them had really good performances. Oscar said one of his best race, but, look, your first year, you're on a podium.
Yeah.
In a car that at the beginning of the year didn't even know what a podium was, right?
Yeah.
So I think all things given, Oscar delivering with the team, all the hard work the men and women of Woking have done and getting that car competitive, and then Oscar delivering on it as a rookie into P3 is a great move. So
Yeah, he's done some great things this year.
Yeah, and then Liam saying, "I don't know why you're not signing me because I just beat this chump. So I don't know. I don't know what you're doing, but good luck."
Yeah.
So anyway, it was a great drive. All right, let's do some mailbag.
You've got mail.
I always love it when our listeners send us some email. You can do that, by the way. If you go to our website, at the very top, there's a little menu over. And on the right-hand side, it says mailbag. And if you click on that, it'll take you to a different page where you can go in and ask your question. And then I check them every week before we do podcasts. First one from John and Sam. So John and his wife love Heart of Racing, Paul. He said a few weeks ago, Paul said that some of us Heart of Racing fans could email him about merch. As a dumb American, I have no idea what his email is or where to find it. My wife and I love the work Heart of Racing does and want to continue to support them both on the track and, more importantly, off the track. Thanks for everything, including a used tire from the Nashville race last year.
We want that back.
They need it this weekend.
We lost cars. We need tires. We need wheels.
Yeah, right. They're turning it into a coffee table.
There we go.
Yeah,
Nice.
So that's great, Paul. Let's see, dubious. How do we get a hold of Paul? And there you go.
How do we?
Well, you could email Paul at paul@theparcfermé.com.
There you go. That's easy.
Yeah.
It's fairly bad. I check it on occasion.
Once a year, I think.
Yeah. But some other people have contacted me about the merchandise, and I've got this list going. And so feel free, just send me an email with your size, but I'd also need an address. And so there's a weird thing going on with the merchandise, but I'm working on getting merchandise to send. I haven't sent it yet, so those that sent me the stuff, don't worry, it's not lost in the mail. It's actually not mailed yet, but I'm still working on it, and I will do it for sure. I guarantee it. So anyone else that's fans of the Heart of Racing and wants something, just drop me a line and we'll figure it out, and I'll get something to you. Maybe may have to wait till after the season's over, but
20, 25, 26, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
So Paul is building a use case, a proof of concept around Heart of Racing merchandising.
Yes, I am trying.
And there you go.
Yeah.
I guess at some point, you're going to end up making me go create non-official Heart of Racing logos to put on shirts, and then I'll just go into our t-shirt store and make them.
Yeah.
Done.
And I'm going to have to cease and desist you.
Or
just completely ignore it and let it go.
You'll have to send me a cease and desist letter. I mean, it would be ambiguous. I wouldn't say Heart of Racing, whatever, No. I might put like Paul and his team in like a logo or Paul HOR or something.
Yeah. I get it. It's a shame because I know a lot of people want that stuff. And yeah.
Well, why should you be the only one that gets that cool team kit?
I know, right?
Yeah. We all want Paul Charsley kit.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, all right.
Yeah.
Great question. Thanks for that. Shumi in Toronto asks, "Hi guys, I've been thinking of this Lance's crash and quality for Singapore. Apparently, Aston was not able to put their reserve driver Drogovic in the car for the race in Singapore because it was Lance that was declared as entered into the race as their driver, and he took part in qualifying. Don't you think this is a flaw in the rules? I think the point of having a reserve driver is to be able to substitute no matter if it's before quali or in this case after a quali shunt."
Yeah, it's a tough one, but I don't mind the ruling. I mean, Drogovic would never have got a lap on the track except in the race, and that is not an easy thing. And then you're at a track like Singapore where you make a mistake and you damage a car. It's really putting the team and the driver at risk. I think throwing them in that late in a weekend. I mean, I think I know Pietro Fittipaldi had to jump into the Haas car in qualifying, I think, and I think that's pretty much the last step you should be allowed to take part, because I think you could be compromising your own self, your team, and other drivers out there with the lack of experience.
Well, and as you mentioned, there's no running of that car after it's rebuilt. You don't even have a shakedown.
Is it safe? You don't get warm-up laps. You don't get anything.
Yeah.
So, I think it's fine. There's got to be a line in the sand at some point. I think
right.
if you're crashing qualifying and the driver can't compete, then, let's just lick our wounds and go on to the next race.
Right. Great question. Let's see. Miles asks this, Paul. How many drivers on the grid do you think could win the title if they were in the best machinery? I think I have 5. He's picked Verstappen, Hamilton, Russell, Norris, Alonso, and maybe Leclerc. That's his 5. Yeah. With the likelihood of having a championship-level driver at your team being low, how does a team like Alpine decide if they should keep or move on from their current seemingly decent drivers? Great question. What do you think?
That is a great question. And I'd question who could win a championship. Tell me if they're in the best car. Tell me who the teammate is. That also helps to know who can win or not win. Right? You got a weak teammate and you're in the best car. Even if you're not the best driver on the grid, you could still win a championship for sure. It's happened before. So how do you decide whether the problem is the driver or the car? Kind of is nearly like that question, isn't it? Right? And there's so many things you can analyze.
Least of which is the salary.
Yeah, salary helps, but that's why the inter-team rivalry is so important, because you're the only way for the team even to measure someone else is against their teammate.
Right.
So they can only really make a decision on one person, and the other person, literally whoever comes out on top through the data, through results, through qualifying, etc., is kind of like the standard that they have to be compared to. How close is that driver to them? There are other things that driver brings to the team, like development ideas. That's how they decide. And then sure, they could keep looking outside the box and see if they can poach someone who's exceeding expectations maybe somewhere else. But it's really that inter-team rivalry, and is it close enough where through the data they're analyzing, okay, well, the car is they can actually tell if the car is deficient in areas versus other cars, and then they have to then look at which driver is maximizing the car and which driver is actually not maximizing the car in different areas. If they're close enough, they're probably not going to make a decision like between Gasly and Ocon. It'd be really hard to say, well, this guy isn't performing like the other one because the car is so up and down from race to race. That isn't the problem. We know at Haas that the drivers are not the problem.
Right.
When you get up to the pinnacle and you're looking at Red Bull, you're looking at, Max Verstappen versus Perez, then you're starting to realize, okay, the car is definitely not the problem. So the driver's errors are more glaring and apparent.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think also, Paul, you have to think as you get closer to the sharp end, that becomes patently the case.
Yeah.
I'm even thinking Aston Martin, it's evidenced. Red Bull, it's evidenced. Not so much Mercedes. I think they're both delivering. McLaren, they're both delivering. If Haas moved up that, I think also, Paul, you got to think about the team eventually starts to think that more. The team is thinking more long term. For that team. So in Haas's case right now, it's not the driver, it's the car. So having two veterans like Nico and Kevin makes sense because they're going to deliver. Both of them are going to deliver whatever is possible.
And they're probably relatively cheap.
And they probably aren't a fortune either, right? Yeah. So that's fine. But as that car got better, they're going to start excited. Hey, we're a lot more competitive. Points are on. We could get 4th, 5th, and championship. If that's the case, you got to start thinking long term. What's my driver prospects? I start looking for the world class drivers where you can get them.
Right, and I can't remember what team we were talking about. It was a while ago, and there, would you sign Alonso? And we're not ready for Alonso because. We're, what comes with Alonso, including the financial side and everything, expectations. And if the team can't produce a car that Alonso can maximize his potential with, they're not ready for him. So they'd be better off with a decent driver they can help along. As we know, Formula One is a long projected performance line of development. So they know when they're supposedly ready. Hopefully.
Yeah. So that's a great question, Miles. Yeah, appreciate that. All right. Well, that does it for this podcast. This is what we think about the Japanese Grand Prix, but I'm curious what you think about the Japanese Grand Prix. You can tell us by going to theparkfermé.com and sharing your opinion. Just do it to Corman Civilli. And by the way, speaking of that, should I say this?
Decorum
I
and
will.
civility?
I will say this. Yes, about
Okay.
decorum. I was over at Auto Sport, and there's some article about Lewis and George and from the race, and I went in there, and then I read the article just to kind of see what they're saying. The article was fine, nothing wrong. The article was well done, and I appreciate it. But I got to the end, and I started looking at the comments. I just want to personally thank our patrons, supporters, and all of our supporters and listeners for not reducing yourself to quasi-sentient amoeba
Yes.
and engaging in the sophomoric just dumpster fire that
Yeah.
is the comment section of some of these websites. I'm telling you, it's just unbelievable to read that crap. And so this is just kudos to you guys who listen and who support us. That, you know, you guys are just absolutely a cut above just the sheer insanity that is the interwebs these days. And I'm really, really grateful for that, especially at our website. You know, when somebody gets a little sideways there, you guys are quick to jump in and say, hey, that isn't how we roll here. You know, get lost, find a different place. Because, yeah, I really appreciate it. So, and a
Yep,
huge thank you
absolutely.
to our Patreon supporters. We could not and would not do this podcast without you. Really appreciate it. If you like the podcast, share it with a friend. Go over to iTunes or your favorite music player, whether it's iTunes, Spotify. Give us a good rating. We'd appreciate that. And Paul, you get a week off. How about
Sorta,
that?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
from this.
I get a week at home.
craziness.
Oh,
Yeah.
I get a week off. There's no Grand Prix next week. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Then we go to Qatar, right?
Yeah,
in 2
Qatar,
weeks.
yeah.
Right. That'll be exciting.
That'll be exciting.
Yeah, well,
From Suzuka to Qatar.
yeah, that ought to be fun. So anyway, all right. Well, until next week when we do it over again, I'll try to find Grace, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about MotoGP from Grace after this weekend. So
Yeah.
stay tuned. So anyway, all right. Until that time, this is Todd, aka Negative Camera, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.